Hey there, welcome to Tech Tip Tuesday. So far in this series we've covered several of the components of a computer, but we haven't talked about what they all plug into yet. So today we're going to cover the motherboard. So today I'm going to talk about what the motherboard is for, what some of its features are, and what it looks like when it's failing. Now there's a lot that could be discussed on this, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to cover the basics. The most noticeable thing about a motherboard is probably the I/O section. This stands for input, output. Now, computers are great and they can do a lot of wonderful things, but if we can't interface with it, or tell it what to do, or read the output from what it's doing, they're not much use to us. So this is where we plug in things like our monitor, our keyboard, our mouse, or our speakers. Now, some of those are input devices, like the keyboard or mouse. We are telling the computer some information or giving it commands on what we want it to do. And some of those are output devices, such as the speakers that are sending the sound out, or the monitor, which is giving us a display out from the computer. This is very noticeable, and if you just look on back of your PC's tower, you're going to be able to see these I/O ports, and they are directly connected to the motherboard. So picture some cities. Each of them are able to produce some good that is really valuable, and they want to trade with one another. Now, even though each city is able of producing, we still need a means of getting it back and forth from city to city so that they can do trade. If we built freeways that were simply one lane, and we expected to put 4 lanes worth of cars or trucks on these roads, there would be too much congestion and they would slow down. But if we built 4-lane freeways, all from city to city, then we could have clear traffic both ways all the time because the highway is able to support the amount of traffic going between each city. This is similar to what a motherboard does between components. We might have a really good processor that we talked about, or really fast random access memory, or really fast storage. But if we can't get the information between each of those devices in a timely fashion, they're going to have to slow down. It doesn't matter how fast they can work, the motherboard simply can't transmit the information between each location fast enough. Now this is why you can buy a computer for just a few $100s at a big box store, because they're going to cheap out on some of these things and lower the speed of those lanes. Now, if you're just doing internet browsing or word processing, something very basic, while the system might not last as long, it will still be able to function. But for higher end computers, these lanes and speed are very important. Now, a very troublesome thing about the motherboard is that since it is connected to everything, it can be very tough to troubleshoot, and sometimes diagnostic information can lead us down rabbit holes because we think we're troubleshooting one thing and it turns out the problem is somewhere else. This could also be called a red herring, something that's going to let us think one thing's a problem when it's really another. For example, I talked about blue screening when memory starts to fail. Well, the motherboard's connected to the memory, and so if there's something on the motherboard that starts to fail that talks to the memory, then you could end up with blue screens that we might think we want to blame on memory, but it's really the motherboard's fault. There are some diagnostics we can use, and we usually use known good parts to test to see whether a motherboard is actually failing or not. Just as a quick demonstration, here's what some of these components look like when they're inserted into the motherboard. So here we've got the CPU socket, and we're simply going to take the CPU, drop it into the socket, close the latch, and lock it in. Memory, just as simple. We put in one corner first, lock in the second, snap each lock, and there it is. Storage, just as simple. Something running from our storage device to our motherboard is simply connected with a cable. We plug it into the SATA port, and we're done. While the motherboard has many functions and many features, there's simply way too much that we could cover here. For the purpose of this quick tech tip, know that the motherboard is what connects everything together, and it's responsible for communication between all these different devices. It can be tricky when it begins to fail, but your system will usually become unresponsive, lock up, or not turn on at all. There are many things that can go wrong, and we're usually going to be using diagnostic parts that we know work in order to test and see if the board is good or not. I hope this has been helpful. If you ever glance inside the case of a computer and you see that big circuit board in the back and wondering what all that stuff is plugged into it, know that that is the motherboard, and it's serving a very important role of allowing you to interact with your computer while allowing everything else to be connected and working as a team. So I hope this has been helpful. Go enjoy your technology.